Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's totally fascinating and, honestly, kind of terrifying. We're talking about the invisible, highly efficient biological machines that quietly rule our planet. We're going to get right down into the microscopic world to see exactly how these organisms wage war on the human body. And trust me, their strategies, they're nothing short of masterclasses in biological warfare.
Think about this. For 3 billion years, bacteria ruled this planet completely alone. They're the ultimate survivors. In fact, right now, your body is home to an estimated 39 trillion bacterial cells. Trillion. They're literally everywhere. In the air you breathe, the water you drink, the soil right beneath your feet. And at this exact moment, billions of foreign pathogens are actively probing, looking for a way inside you. It sounds like straight-up science fiction, but this is the absolute reality of our biological world. So you gotta ask, how exactly do these tiny, invisible machines dismantle something as complex as the human body? We've got our own internal fortresses, right? Our immune systems, tough cellular barriers, and yet they still get through. Let's look at the exact mechanisms they use to break our defenses. Seeing this play out step by step is going to completely change how you think about getting sick. Section 1. The airborne invaders. Let's jump right in. When it comes to airborne threats, pathogens have wildly different ways of attacking. Take tuberculosis and pneumonia, for example. Both ride in on droplets you inhale, bypassing the tiny sweeping hairs in your lungs to reach the deepest air sacs, the alveoli. But their strategies are totally night and day. Mycobacterium tuberculosis, it plays this incredibly patient game. It's a tough, waxy little rod that actively dodges your immune cells and builds a defensive cluster called a granuloma. It essentially sets up an internal fortress and slowly destroys your lung tissue from the inside out. It's a classic slow siege. Now compare that to Streptococcus pneumonia. This guy doesn't wait around. It launches a rapid blitzkrieg. It colonizes those exact same air sacs and triggers this massive, sudden rush of thick cellular fluid. It's an aggressive flood that literally drowns you on dry land. Two completely different, totally devastating strategies, right there in our lungs. Moving on to Section 2, breaching the defenses.
Okay, so the blood-brain barrier is supposed to be this impenetrable wall, right? A super secure boundary protecting your brain. But the pathogen that causes meningitis, Neisseria meningitis, aggressively hunts for this ultimate prize. It doesn't just casually bump into the barrier, it literally wedges itself through that tightly packed wall of cells. And once it breaks through, it causes massive, rapid inflammation of the meninges, the lining of your nervous system. The swelling gets so severe that your nervous system basically crushes itself against your own skull. It causes your neural highways to just short-circuit and spark out. It's terrifyingly fast.
And that intense reaction really perfectly illustrates the horror of sepsis. This happens when bacteria manage to completely corrupt the bloodstream itself. First, they release toxic elements into your blood, but the real catastrophe is what happens next. Your immune system completely panics. Realizing the infection is uncontainable, it launches this systemic inflammatory response, basically an all-out nuclear option. It creates a scorched earth environment where blood vessels literally crack open and blister. This extreme overreaction starves your cells of oxygen, which we call cellular hypoxia, and that rapidly cascades into complete organ failure and septic shock. Your body literally destroys its own organs just trying to kill the invader.
All right, Section 3, the toxic blitz.
Let's move down to the gut. Here we find pathogens that use microscopic toxic proteins as their main weapons. Take Vibrio cholerae, the bacteria behind cholera. This little comma-shaped pathogen doesn't even need to get into your bloodstream. It just anchors to your intestines and pumps out the cholera toxin. This toxin reverses your cellular osmotic gradient. Basically, it acts like a massive biological vacuum, violently pulling water and electrolytes straight out of your blood and into the intestine. It drains you fast. Then you have pathogenic E. coli. This one deploys sugar toxins, which you can think of as microscopic molecular scissors. They slice right into your complex cellular machinery and just freeze it instantly. This shuts down your internal systems, leading to catastrophic organ collapse, especially in the kidneys, in just a matter of days.
For a century, our medicines kept these horrors at bay, but they're fighting back. Section 4, Dawn of the Superbug.
So, how exactly are these bacteria outsmarting modern medicine? Well, it all comes down to horizontal gene transfer. See, unlike humans, bacteria don't have to wait to pass advantageous traits to their kids. They can literally, physically connect to each other using a tiny biological bridge and swap rings of protective genetic code called plasmids. It's kind of like
Actually, it's exactly like a planetary dark web for bacteria. If just one single cell figures out how to survive a new antibiotic, it can share that cheat code with its neighbors in real time. They're actively learning our secrets and building collective immunity. Which brings us to the ultimate shadow threat, MRSA. Thanks to that genetic dark web we just talked about, MRSA has evolved a hyperspecific defense. It synthesizes altered penicillin-binding proteins, specifically one called PBP2A. And because this protein's physical shape is altered, our frontline antibiotics, which usually bind to those proteins to pop the cell, they just slide right off. They become utterly useless. MRSA is actively rebuilding the exact bacterial defenses we spend decades trying to tear down. The magic bullets that saved your grandparents' lives. Yeah, they're actively failing against these newly fortified invaders.
All of this leaves us with a chilling, yet absolutely crucial final thought. To quote, "The next global war won't be fought on battlefields. It will be fought inside your cells." By understanding these mechanisms, seeing the slow sieges, the molecular scissors, the bacterial dark web, we can truly grasp the terrifying adaptability of this invisible empire. As we face the very real threat of antibiotic resistance, we really have to ask ourselves, are we prepared for a war where the invaders are already inside the gates? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a dark, hidden world that exists right alongside our own. We're going to be profiling the absolute most ruthless microscopic predators on the planet.
So, let's dive right in. I want to completely challenge your perception of what an apex predator truly looks like. You know, we usually picture massive creatures, right? The beasts roaming the savanna or those huge, terrifying shadows lurking deep in the ocean. It makes sense. We naturally fear what we can easily see. But the reality of Earth's true assassins, it's actually much closer to home and way, way more hidden.
Here's the crazy part. These predators don't have teeth. Nope, no teeth at all. They literally do not need a jaw to completely devour their prey.
And they don't have claws to tear you apart either. There are no sharp edges, no physical weapons whatsoever that we'd normally associate with a lethal threat in the wild.
Instead, get this. They orchestrate complete and total biological destruction using just a single cell. That's it. They are entirely self-contained, microscopic architects of devastation, and they can literally shift their shape to consume you from the inside out.
So, what are we dealing with? Well, we are not up against simple bacteria here. We're talking about complex eukaryotes known as Protozoa. Because they have a defined nucleus and really advanced cellular machinery, they're actually much closer to our own biology than you might think. And many of them have evolved these incredibly specialized, almost alien-like life cycles with one single, terrifying purpose: to perfectly infiltrate the human host.
Which brings us to part 1 of our explainer, the vector-borne assassins, the hijackers of the blood and mind.
Okay, picture this. You're in a humid tropical jungle. A female Anopheles mosquito lands softly on your arm. Just beneath the skin, she pours these microscopic, glowing shards called sporozoids directly into your bloodstream. This is Plasmodium, the parasite that causes malaria. And it orchestrates a beautifully horrific takeover. It hijacks your liver tissue, invades your red blood cells, and then literally bursts them from within, kind of like tiny volcanic eruptions. This causes intense cyclic fevers and severe anemia, making it the absolute deadliest parasitic disease on Earth. I mean, millions of people fall to this single-celled architect every single year.
Now, looking at some other culprits, these pathogens have terrifyingly distinct methods of execution. Take Trypanosoma brucei, the one responsible for African sleeping sickness. Transmitted by the tsetse fly, these little whip-tailed protozoa actually swim elegantly right through your cerebrospinal fluid. They breach the blood-brain barrier and completely scramble your internal clock. Day becomes night, sleep turns into a waking coma, and eventually total neurological collapse. On the flip side, you have Trypanosoma cruzi. This one is transmitted by the kissing bug and causes Chagas disease. But instead of the brain, it goes for the heart, quietly expanding and fatally swelling the cardiac tissue over a period of years.
As the saying goes, while one burns your blood, another steals your mind. It's an incredibly dramatic reality, but it perfectly captures the horror of these vector-borne killers. And honestly, it's a pretty grim bridge to our next category of threats.
Moving on to part 2, the Trojan horses. These are your everyday threats. And the scariest part? These assassins don't even need a mosquito. They just wait, very patiently, for you to invite them inside.
Imagine you're at a bustling street market. Someone pours water from a dusty jug into a glass.
while hiding inside that seemingly normal water are clear armor-like structures. This is Amoeba histolytica, and it survives the harshest environments by cloaking itself in these tough cysts. But once you swallow it, it sheds that armor and starts secreting acid to literally bore directly into your intestinal walls. It's brutal, causing bloody dysentery and liver abscesses. Then you have Giardia lamblia, which works a bit differently, but honestly, it's just as nasty. It uses this specialized, tiny sucking disc to coat the lining of your small intestine, basically walling it off and entirely blocking your body's ability to absorb nutrients.
But listen, a dusty jug of water is definitely not the only Trojan horse out there. We absolutely have to talk about an elegant, microscopic manipulator hiding right in plain sight. I'm talking about Toxoplasma gondii. This thing is quite literally the stuff of science fiction, and it's living right inside our homes.
So, this parasite can unwittingly be harbored by our closest domestic companions, our house cats. It's an absolute master manipulator. To make sure its life cycle continues, Toxoplasma gondii actually alters the brains of rodents, completely rewiring them so they become totally fearless of cats, just walks right up to them. And you want to know the most unsettling part of all this? It currently rests in the brains and tissues of millions of human hosts right now. It forms this quiet, dormant lattice network within us, just waiting in the shadows for our immune system to slip up. Wild, right?
All right, let's get into part 3, the perfect killer, swift and merciless. This specific pathogen, it doesn't wait to be swallowed in your drinking water, and it sure doesn't need a bug to do its dirty work. It just strikes. Picture a teenager diving into a beautiful, sunlit freshwater lake on a hot summer day. As they hit the water, just a tiny bit gets forced up their nose. Well, Naegleria fowleri, the brain-eating amoeba, doesn't need to be swallowed. Once it's in the nasal passage, it travels upward along the human olfactory nerve, following chemical trails directly into the brain. It acts as this terrifying microscopic swarm, aggressively consuming brain cells and causing a devastating disease known as PAM, or primary amoebic meningoencephalitis.
I really want to pause here for a second, because the numbers are staggering. Once the symptoms of this brain-eating amoeba begin, survival drops to a terrifying statistical anomaly. We are talking about a mortality rate greater than 97%. Let that sink in. It is swift, it is incredibly aggressive, and is entirely merciless. This brings us to part 4, the invisible front line. With such merciless predators surrounding us at all times, how exactly does humanity fight back against something we literally can't even see?
Well, we face this massive scientific paradox, and it's known as the eukaryote dilemma. See, because these pathogens are eukaryotes, just like us, engineering a medical weapon to destroy them without harming our own human cells is a monumental challenge. Think about it. If you create a drug designed to break apart a parasite's complex cellular machinery, you run a huge risk of breaking apart human cellular tissue right along with it. Their biological similarity to us is exactly what makes them the ultimate elusive targets. And since there are currently no vaccines against these microscopic assassins, humanity has to rely entirely on 3 rigorous shields just to survive. First up, basic sanitation. This is absolutely crucial to ensure our drinking water and food are totally clear of those armored cysts we talked about. Second is vector control, basically targeting the habitats of the mosquitoes and flies that act as delivery systems into our blood. And finally, advanced molecular engineering. Scientists in high-tech labs are constantly searching for that one perfectly targeted molecule, the one that can rip a parasite apart without leaving a scratch on our own human cells. So what does this all mean for us? Well, the next time you look out at a crystal-clear river or even just pour yourself a glass of tap water, I want you to consider this. In the grand war for survival, humanity so often looks up to the stars, or we worry about massive beasts in the wild. But our absolute oldest, most resilient rivals, they're right here with us, hidden inside a single drop of water. Stay curious, everyone.
Okay, let's dive into this, because what we are looking at today is a battleground that literally exists all around us, and, well, even deep inside us. It's the invisible war between humanity and viral pathogens. You know, we often think of our greatest threats as massive things we can actually see, large existential dangers we can track and measure. But the truth is, for millennia, the absolute most devastating enemies we've ever faced have been entirely microscopic. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how these invisible invaders operate, how they target our bodies, and, most importantly, how human ingenuity has fought back. To really grasp the stakes of this war, I want you to consider a number: 300 million. Long before modern science could even peer through a microscope and give them a proper name, these invaders were wiping out entire empires. The smallpox virus alone, for instance, claimed an estimated 300 to 500 million human lives over its existence. Think about that sheer scale for a second. That is nearly 500 million lives lost to an enemy we couldn't even see. It's just a staggering historical toll. So what exactly are we dealing with here? Well, at its core, a virus is essentially just a microscopic packet of genetic material, DNA or RNA, wrapped up in a protective protein coat. But here's the absolute crucial point. They cannot survive or replicate without a living host cell. They aren't even technically alive. They don't breathe, they don't think. They're basically biological zombies made of code. Yet despite lacking the most basic traits of life, these entities have continuously rewritten the history of human survival just by hijacking our own cellular machinery. So here's the biological map for our journey today. First up, we'll look at the airborne siege, focusing on respiratory infections. Then, we'll move into the predators of blood and brain. Third, we'll uncover the silent infiltrators targeting our immune system. And finally, we'll look at humanity's counterattack. All right, part 1, the airborne siege, respiratory infections. Our absolute greatest vulnerability as a species is simply our everyday, non-negotiable need to breathe shared air. Pathogens like influenza, SARS-CoV-2, or even just the rhinovirus that gives you a common cold, they travel completely unnoticed on tiny, invisible aerosol droplets. Just imagine a crowded subway car or a busy office. Someone sneezes, and a cloud of these microscopic particles just drifts through the air right into a new host's nasal passages. And once they make entry, they hijack the respiratory tract. They literally turn your lungs into a localized war zone, triggering these massive immune storms that fill the lungs with fluid and leave the host gasping for air. Moving right along to part 2, predators of blood and brain, hemorrhagic and neurological infections. And this brilliantly illustrates how viruses adopt two incredibly devastating, yet different strategies once they get past our surface defenses. First, you have the vascular hijackers, things like Ebola, Marburg, Lassa, and Dengue. They target our blood vessels, causing severe endothelial damage. Basically, they destroy the delicate lining of our veins, leading to systemic internal bleeding. Now contrast that with nervous system invaders like rabies and polio. Instead of attacking the blood, they completely bypass it to penetrate the central nervous system. They attack our motor neurons or directly inflame the brain. They're going after the very wiring of the human body. To really understand the sheer destructive power of these vascular hijackers, just look at this stat: 88%. When we talk about emerging level 4 pathogens like the Marburg virus, which often originate deep within these remote, untouched ecosystems, you're looking at a fatality rate of up to 88% once it starts its assault on the human vascular system. It is an incredibly fast, absolutely brutal biological event. Now, of all these predators, rabies is just biologically fascinating and, honestly, terrifying. It acts almost like a master of mind control. Step 1, it completely evades the immune system right upon entry. Then, step 2, it creeps slowly along the host's nervous system, almost like a pulse traveling directly up the spine. Step 3, it hits the main target, inflaming the central brainstem. And step 4, this is where the true horror of this pathogen lies. It literally rewires the host's brain. This results in hydrophobia, an intense physical fear of water, fatal aggression, and an almost 100% fatality rate once those physical symptoms actually manifest. Okay, part 3, the silent infiltrators, immunological infections. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights two totally contrasting views on viral survival. You've got the smash and grab approach, which is typical for respiratory viruses. They just enter, destroy the host cells to multiply rapidly, and escape to the next person as fast as possible. But then you have the Trojan horse approach, used by retroviruses like HIV. And this is entirely different. They don't just attack and leave. They merge. They slowly unravel our DNA and weave their own genetic sequence directly into ours. It's a permanent biological integration. Because by incorporating their own genetic code directly into our immune cells, these pathogens actually become part of our own defenses. Take HIV, for example. It specifically attacks CD4 T cells. Think of these as the absolute top generals of your immune system. The virus literally turns your body's own shield into its executioner. Similarly, things like chronic hepatitis B and C merge to cause progressive liver destruction over years and years. Because they permanently merge rather than just attacking and leaving, these viruses result in a lifelong progressive decay of the human host. Which brings us to part 4, humanity's counterattack, the resolution. I know. That all sounds incredibly dark. But believe me, humanity is absolutely not defenseless in this invisible war. Let's bring it back to the ghost of smallpox for a second. After centuries of devastation and hundreds of millions of lives lost, we fought back. And we won. In 1980, thanks to an unprecedented global vaccination campaign, smallpox became the first and currently the only human viral disease to be completely eradicated from the face of the earth. A total, literal victory against one of our oldest foes. And really, that historical victory laid the absolute foundation for the incredible modern tools we're using right now. We are actively developing highly targeted vaccines to train our immune systems long before an invader ever arrives. We're utilizing sophisticated antivirals designed to precisely disrupt viral replication right inside the cell. We're even advancing gene editing. We are quite literally learning to rewrite our own biological defenses. We're taking our greatest existential threats and turning them into towering milestones of human ingenuity. All because we are finally learning to speak the genetic language of our microscopic invaders. So the crucial point is perfectly summarized by this thought right here. Survival isn't a permanent victory, it's an ongoing evolution. It's so true, right? This biological dance of viral mutation and scientific adaptation, it's never truly going to end. It is a constant, intricate, and absolutely fascinating arms race. Which leaves us with one final, provocative thought to consider. We might feel super safe in our modern concrete cities, surrounded by all our technology. But out there, the next invisible threat is already silently mutating. And as it does, how will human science evolve to meet it? It's a huge question and a deeply inspiring ongoing journey. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep learning.